brief. Today is actually a pretty cool day because not only are we doing a clothing brief to keep you in the loop on all the things that are happening in the news, but season 5 clothing culture just rolled out.
Yay.
Yay! It's a great episode. We kicked off with Sharon Grobard from the SG Files. It's a fantastic conversation about how culture informs trend and offers a really wonderful perspective about what we're going to anticipate in the coming year.
Small shout out.
Yeah,
Last week we didn't do clothing brief. We
that's
were in
right.
Miami at
Cornet's Connections.
yes.
Boy, was that it was a surprising event. We learned a lot. We made a lot of new friends, made incredible connections,
Yes.
and it was, gosh, 300 people
Yeah.
that are all key stakeholders in the industry talking about what's happening right now, solutions to help improve onshoring opportunities.
And the digital on-demand technology that Cornette has established is pretty remarkable. And
Yeah.
so, and they hosted a wonderful event. So a big shout out and a big thanks to Cornette for flying us down and having us at the
Yeah,
event.
yeah. We'll be bringing you some technologies in season 5 that are new to our industry, and so we're going to make sure that we share some of those findings that we uncovered at this convention. So let's go to the news, shall we? First up is a conversation that was actually discussed last week at the convention we were at. There was a lot of conversation around Nike. Nike has been in the news for things that I'm sure they don't prefer to be in the news for right
Yeah,
now. They
for
have
sure.
just reported a 9% dip over year. And, a company of that size, that's a substantial number. It's a $11.3 million dip. And there's a few contributing
$1 billion.
billion,
Yeah.
billion.
Billion with a B. Yeah.
And so there are a lot of different things happening that contribute to a dip that size, but Brett, let's break down a few of those.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was talked about last week was their partnership with Flextronics.
Mhm.
Flextronics is a massive Singaporeese-based kind of textile automation and machinery company, 75,000 employees, long history. And you look at Nike, this massive juggernaut manufacturing powerhouse. They all decided to get together and have a partnership and create a US-based manufacturing plant that with high expectations. And it's really
Significant investment.
yes,
Yes.
significant investment. It's really been a complete failure.
Yeah.
And so, this on the tail of the conversation we had with the Louis Vuitton failure, it really exposes a lot of US manufacturing challenges, at least in our industry.
Mhm.
The one surprise in this case is that this was really focused on innovation and technology and
Yeah.
automation and really onshoring large sneakers. I think that they wrote off, or they had hundreds of millions in losses. They've
Right.
got all sorts of issues. One group is blaming the other,
Yeah.
but when you got two powerhouses like this again, and it's just been such
Yeah.
a horrible challenge, it is this kind of cautionary note about really understanding the expense
Mhm.
and the challenge for onshoring some of these industries. It's got to be
Yes.
really well thought out.
They talked about one of the challenges, of course, is training and skill set,
Sure, of course.
and of course successful implementation
Yeah.
of that technology. So, it's not enough to have the plan or the vision.
Yeah.
You've got to have the right people behind it.
Yeah.
So, they've also I know announced at the fourth quarter of last year that they're going to be spending around $450 million in a company restructure.
Yeah.
So, these investments are quite significant, and if they don't provide the value, it obviously creates a bigger burn.
Well, and companies go through different cycles, right?
Mhm.
Pre-peak, peak, post-peak. We always talk about evolution, not revolution. Nike's grown to such a massive, massive powerhouse. And, perhaps like a lot of companies that get in that position, they get very, very comfortable.
Mhm.
And then the world kind of catches up or moves past that. And so, they're experiencing some challenges
They
now.
are.
Yeah.
Another announcement recently with the whole NFT collapse.
Yeah.
A lawsuit over that. So there's,
NFT is just a kind of a crazy
yeah,
conversation. And so people are suing, I think, $5 million
yeah,
or something because they had they had touted that these things had value. And of course, NFTs really don't.
really
I mean,
didn't.
the value is in the demand, right? If a
Hmm.
customer wants it, then there's some value intrinsically, I suppose. But NFTs were sort of a fad at the time. And I think, with that comes the collapse of the value. And now people are upset. But
Right.
come on, forewarned,
It was an
should have
investment.
been.
Not all investments pay off.
Yeah,
Right.
kind of a insane investment, really.
So, another story from the White House, Trump has issued a mandate that all truck drivers are required to speak English. This, of course, is going to have a significant impact on deliveries.
Well, it could certainly. I think they estimate somewhere that about 20% of the trucking workforce has foreign speaking drivers. It does make sense. There is this whole conversation that it could improve safety, but changing that workforce could have some dynamic implications again on raising costs. And
Hmm.
again, the challenge isn't that some of these conversations, because this is supported by the Teamsters and the union and the truck
Hmm.
drivers. They'd like to make sure that there is English speaking. We live in a English, multinational, multicultural country. However, English is our common language, and they would like to reinforce that. But the challenge that's happening with the current administration is lack of planning, revolution, not evolution. Timing is not in place. They make these wholesale changes rather quickly without time for
Yeah,
implementation. And that creates chaos,
chaos.
it creates instability.
Yeah.
And so, that's a challenge, with the current administration. Some of the underlying things that they're attempting to do, there are things to support some of those decisions, but you cannot create those without warning, without ramifications. And so, you know, Trump as the candidate promised lower pricing, all these different things. And all of these things are actually opposite, are having
Well, yeah,
opposite
because it
effects.
takes time to implement these.
Exactly.
Yeah, and find
Right. You
find
can't just turn on
alternatives,
the switch.
or or let go 20% of the workforce.
Yeah.
With
So there's certainly
so yeah.
challenges.
Okay, so we have another lawsuit in the headline. This time it's Gucci who is suing some retailers over alleged counterfeit sales. Um, this is kind of an interesting conversation because in the past we've talked about how there are some of these luxury brands that acknowledge that not everybody can afford their product, and they realize that when people are wearing one of their products, they're walking billboards for that brand. So they kind of let a certain amount of it kind of just fly.
The counterfeit stuff kind of
Yes,
fly. They,
exactly.
in some ways, look the other way. But
Hmm.
the other part of the interesting part of the lawsuit too is that one of the targets is Lord and Taylor, and
Mm.
Lord and Taylor is non-existent. A new group, Regal, has just bought it from a previous group, and the 75-person team is kind of relaunching it as an online store. But the whole brick and mortar in the history of Lord and Taylor, I mean, the old company is gone, and the
Yeah.
amount of the lawsuit is really interesting.
It is 14 million is what they're going after.
Yeah, which more than likely would be all the legal
I
fees just to
know.
chase it. There's not
Yeah.
going to be a income. And so perhaps Gucci, faced with the 20% losses, is looking to maybe more protect that
Trademark.
brand, is to
Yeah.
more streamline that sales through Gucci to try to,
Recover.
protect, the intellectual property. So I don't know. It's an interesting deal.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, the last story is a cute story today. We're going to talk about Labubus. And here's what's funny. I just discovered Labubus last week. When we were in Miami, I saw them everywhere. In fact, I saw them on some Gucci bags. So I
Are
was
they
like,
real
what?
Labubus or are
Right,
they fake? Yeah.
right. I mean, this is the thing. So Labubus are a little bit of the fur babies of the handbag accessory world right now. These
Yes.
cute little creatures that are starting to be a top trending craze.
Yeah, it's really interesting, sold online. They have different, I mean, some of these are up to a thousand
I know.
dollars. I mean, I don't know. It sounds
Yes,
very reminiscent of old plush toy
it does.
histories
They're
when I was much younger.
goofy
So
little monster.
yes,
If you haven't seen them yet, check it out. It'll definitely make you laugh. But it is a really interesting case study of how they've gone to market. You know, they've really leaned in heavily on social media marketing strategies, limited release, this kind of blind box,
yeah, you
like
don't
you
know
don't
what
know
you're
what
gonna
you're going to
get.
get.
Something opens. Yeah,
And when it launched,
hence Pokemon cards and all these other things in the past. Yeah,
yeah, it launched at a price point that was very obtainable. You
sure.
know, I think what was it originally under 10? Now it's 20 or something like
Now it's
that.
1,000.
But
Yeah,
yes,
in some
there's some
cases. Yeah,
collector ones. So
yeah,
get on the craze, right?
sure.
Well, thank you for joining us today and learning a little bit about some of the trending topics in our industry. If there's things that you think we should be talking about, please reach out and do not forget to subscribe so that you can stay apprised of upcoming conversations. And remember, season 5 today. Thank you for joining us.